Hello. Welcome to tonight's bedtime story by Lucid Tales. I hope your day has been smooth and restful. But whether it has been calm comfort or fraught boredom and stress, it's time to relax now. Find somewhere comfortable, maybe your bed or a favourite armchair, and make sure you're ready for sleep. Gently stretch and feel the freedom of your body, the little loosening that means it's time for bed. Tonight's story is another tale from my book, Genre Fluid, released at the end of this month. I hope you enjoy it. It is called Molly. Dates are difficult. I find it hard to be specific about the earlier centuries of my life. The brain can only hold so many memories. The years blur into one another. I remember that a Caesar was in power in Rome, but beyond that I cannot tell you. In truth, I do not even remember where I was from. It may not even exist anymore. Once I was one of many. A mortal human with a set lifespan and no more. But when I was the age I appear to be now, around 20 or so, wouldn't you say? I was changed. It didn't happen overnight, but gradually. The change wasn't noticeable at first. At that old you don't age so fast, and it was normal then to be often ignored in favour of those who were older, more experienced, wiser, men. And then, of course, I entered that period of self-important study that it seems all young people go through, posturing and sitting alone in my room, reading Aristotle and Socrates by candlelight, pretentious to a fault. At that point I hardly noticed that no one was talking to me. I was so busy talking to them. And if they didn't seem to be listening, well, that was fine too. I was more than enough entertainer and audience to appreciate my own genius. I have a vague notion now that they didn't approve. Wherever I was, their perceptions of women and education seemed positively patriarchal. What else has not changed? However, my blithe insensitivity to my peers faded with time, and I realised that perhaps I had alienated my friends during that period, been just a little too self-congratulatory, and began attempting to make amends with some of them. I couldn't understand why they did not respond to my invitations, nor why it was so difficult persuading my servants to bring me food on occasion. Only after I had gone 3 weeks without it did I realise that it had become unnecessary. After that I began to pay attention. I noticed that it wasn't simply my friends who were ignoring me, but everyone. My servants had continued keeping the place clean and tidy as though waiting for a master to return, and they responded sluggishly to my commands, if they noticed my loud, demanding voice in the first place. As with all young people, being ignored was aggravating, and I began to make rather a fool of myself. I would run into the street and wave a sword at passers-by, just to make them notice me. It astounded me that they had no reaction to an edged weapon being waved in their faces until I had continued raving at them long enough, upon which they would give me a vague, queer look as though I was merely handing out pamphlets. As soon as I paused for breath, their eyes would slide off me and they would walk on past. After the initial annoyance had passed, I began to find this phenomenon rather amusing, and I admit I took advantage of it many times. It is very easy to steal a pitcher of wine here or a pouch of gold there when no one knows you exist. I even once sneaked into the emperor's or prince's or king's rooms and, well, that's not exactly fit for retelling. Suffice to say, I got up to all the mischief my new little trick could allow me. And for a while that was enough. I evaded ill-meaning men with ease. I took whatever I wanted from wherever I wanted it. I hid in baths, etc. But very quickly that all became rather tiresome. I was bored, and I was lonely. I fell madly in love with a girl I saw in the baths, and pursued her relentlessly as all hot-headed morons do at first. It did me no good, though I doubt the outcome would have been any different had my little problem not arisen. She could neither initiate conversation with me nor remember me long enough for even the briefest of partings. I was as a face one has seen in a crowd a few times. Nondescript, insignificant, and completely immemorable. Of course, at the time this rent my heart. I tried to kill myself several times, often in front of her, and her absolute indifference cut me deeper than any knife could. Most often I tried to hang myself, but I never had the stamina for it in the end, and so here I am. I still do not quite know whether I am immortal or just exceptionally long-lived. And so I lived on, down through the centuries. The biggest advantage of my situation, I've found, is travel. I never have to pay a fare, or even really care about where I'm going. I will survive whatever comes my way with ease. I never stay anywhere long enough to fall in love. I learned that the hard way, after so many hundreds of failed romances. Of course, as you can see, my attitude toward that has changed somewhat. I like America. I have lived here for many decades. I used to come and visit quite regularly before it was discovered, as the Europeans insist on calling it, even though we all know that, embarrassingly, the Egyptians got here first. Regardless, once I'd realised that I couldn't kill myself, I set out to find out what was at the edge of the world. As it turned out, another land. Sparsely populated and beautiful, and only a few weeks away. Huge. I lived here, far from the people, for about a century, almost completely alone. Of course, I continued on my way after crossing Northern America. I didn't discover South America for quite some time after that, and eventually reached what I believe is now a part of China. I can't remember if it was then. But there were many beautiful places and people, and I stayed there for a long time too. Eventually I moved on and found India. I loved India. It was beautiful. It was hot. And the world was bursting with beauty. The air smelt of dust and sun and dirty barefoot children, ripe fruit, and above all, warmth. But when colonialism hit, everything changed. I have to admit I left. I couldn't stand watching somewhere I loved so much forced under the thumb of imperialism. I have not been back since. Despite all of the wonderful places I've seen, I still love America the most. It is my home. I hate what has been done to its rolling hills and endless plains, its beautiful people and cultures, its dense forests and silhouetted mountain peaks, but it is the place I choose to be. And now, as you can see, there is another reason. I said there was another reason why I stay here. And there is. If I had not met her, I would have left again, disgusted by what has become of this once paradisaical land. Perhaps I would have sought out the Antarctic, and howled along with the wind for a few centuries. Sometimes it is tiring to always sing alone. When I said that relationships have been impossible, it had held true for the past 2 millennia. Recently, very recently, only about 20 years ago, I met the woman I love. She was the same as everyone at first. She didn't see me, or really hear me, but I persisted. I have not persisted for a long time. It has been too painful. But masochism must have been strong in me that day, for persist I did. I followed her to her car, from the bar in which she had been sitting, slightly in front of the man I knew meant her harm. When she shifted the keys from between her fingers to unlock the car, he struck. Or he would have done. Needless to say, I intervened. As I recall, he screamed rather satisfyingly when I broke his fingers. He staggered back, looking distraught and howling in pain like some enormous infant. She threw the door of her car open, jumped in, started the engine, and door still open, reversed into him. Not very hard, more's the pity. It's difficult to get up speed in a multi-story parking lot, but he got the message and fell over before half staggering, half running away. She opened the passenger side door and in no uncertain terms ordered me to get in. I was shocked and didn't respond at first. "Get in," she insisted, scowling at me. I had never heard more beautiful poetry. I complied, and we drove to a nearby late-night diner, where under the baleful eye of the night barman we drank bitter coffee together. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why were you following me?" I must say I floundered. I had not spoken to anyone but myself for well over 500 years. I cleared my throat, my voice rusty from lack of use. I realized that so little had it been used, I had all but forgotten my own name. I can't remember. It seemed so silly then, so utterly apt that the last person of all to forget me was myself, that I burst out laughing. She just watched me with a careful frown, her sooty eyeliner vague and blurry around her eyes. I think she thought I was mad, or drunk, or some combination of the two. At any rate, I'm sure she was questioning the wisdom of her decision to invite me along. I briefly wondered what I looked like. Mirrors had been alien to me for many years. "I'm sorry." I tried again. "I am..." A chance to reinvent myself, perhaps. I took the first name that came into my head. "Taran. I'm Taran." "Did you just make that up on the spot?" "Yes," I admitted. "It's been so long since someone said my name that I've forgotten it." "Shit." "I followed you because he was following you. It's sometimes useful not being noticed." I think she caught the bitter tone in my voice then, because she asked me what I meant. I studied her carefully before deciding to throw all caution to the winds and respond with exactly what I had not intended to. The truth. "I'm over 2,000 years old. I can't kill myself, and usually no one can see me." The alarm in her eyes indicated that that had probably not been sensible, but I'd already jumped in up to my neck. I might as well hold my head under the water. "Watch," I told her, and stood, keeping my eyes on her. I was afraid, in truth, that if I looked away she would instantly forget me again. I walked calmly over to the nightstaff and removed his hat. His eyes didn't even flicker. I walked back to her, holding it, and handed it to her. She turned it around in her hands, and the barman frowned, heading over. "Very funny, give it back." She gave it to him with an apologetic smile, and he returned to his bar with it. Her luminous eyes turned back to me, amazed. Another jolt of shock hit me. She had looked away, interacted with another person, and still she had seen me. We talked for a long while that night. Well, I did. A few centuries with no one to talk to, and you find yourself with quite the flood of words built up. I cried too, and she held me. We agreed to meet the next morning for coffee, and with a hopeful, heavy heart I watched her drive away. The next morning I waited for 15 minutes before walking away. She had forgotten me. Once again I was alone. Then I saw her hurrying along the pavement toward the coffee shop, and the lead weight in my heart lifted, leaving me light enough to run in after her. She sat down, looking around as though confused. I ordered my coffee on the little screen and carefully watched her for a few minutes. Her eyes slid over me with a frown. She didn't know me, but she had still come. I decided to sit down with her and see what happened, steeling myself to be looked through. "Is the seat taken?" I asked. She glanced at me without recognition and shook her head. "Go right ahead." She smiled. "Are you waiting for someone?" I asked, and her forehead creased, a worried frown etched on her pale face. She looked so different from the night before, her skin bare of its party paint. I could have written poetry about the pores of her skin, her short eyelashes, the dimple in her chin. "I think so. I said I'd meet someone here, but I can't remember who." She giggled nervously, looking away and rubbing her forehead. "I must sound daft." "I don't think you're daft," I said softly. This was strange, new. How could she remember me and yet not remember me? A memory slid through me, fluid and elusive as an eel. This had happened before, at the beginning. I had agreed to meet a friend and he had arrived but forgotten why. A fragile hope began to build in my chest. Maybe it was reversing. Maybe this was a symptom of the fade of my curse. Maybe I would be free. The hope was as thin and delicate as an eggshell, and I tucked it away. I didn't want to look at it too closely or it might disappear. The woman, I realized abruptly I still didn't know her name, was watching me closely with a frown. "Do I know you?" she asked, eyes narrowing into slits as she struggled to remember. Her knuckles rubbed her forehead until it was red, and I wanted to snatch her wrists away to stop her hurting herself. The translucent skin of her temples looked obscenely vulnerable. I waited, terrified of scaring her away if I told her everything. "I do know you," she murmured slowly. "It's like wading through syrup. I met you. You helped me, and we had coffee. Did I arrange to meet you here?" "Yes," I said quietly, gazing at her. She was beautiful, even with her forehead rubbed red and patchy. In the depths of each tiny flaw there was perfection. "We met last night." "Of course," she snapped her fingers, suddenly brightening. "You're the woman from the car park. You helped me, and I drove us to a diner, and everyone forgets you, and I just forgot you." She looked shocked, staring hard at me with her wide eyes. "Is that how it happens? Will I just forget you every time you walk away?" "I don't know," I murmured, looking at my coffee. "No one has even seen me for 2,000 years, she finished for me, looking awed. "I remember. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." "What for?" I was puzzled. "I just forgot you." I threw my head back and laughed. "You have nothing to apologize for. Thank you. You're the first person to have seen me in so long." "Thank you." I didn't cry this time, but I came close. I had long since lost any embarrassment about such things. When no one can see you, you can cry in public all you like. Her eyes sparkled in the morning light more softly than they had in the harsh light of the diner. I could have forgotten myself looking into them. To cut a long story short, we slept together that night. When we awoke, she didn't remember me. Thought she must have been out late and picked me up whilst drunk. She was politely friendly but distant, and it took her an hour before she remembered where she knew me from. She laughed and cried, and I cried, but we held each other and got through it. I have lost count now of how many times that has happened. Some days she worries it is her, that she has amnesia, that there is something in her head that makes me ineffable, impossible to remember, that she has cancer, dementia, something missing inside. She worries that she is insane, that I am a product of her lonely imagination. On those days my heart aches like her small fist is clenched tight around it and spasming with her sobs. On those days I am tempted to leave and never come back, to let her forget me, and wonder briefly why she spent so many years alone. But I am selfish. I need her. I have spent so many lifetimes alone, entirely separate from the rest of mankind. She is my gift from the gods, my salvation. She is my deity now. Even that would not be enough to make me stay in the face of her piercing sorrow, but she has made me promise every day since we met that I will not do it, that I will not leave her alone and wondering, will not let me remove my entire presence from her life. When she says this, no matter how many times she has said it before, she is fierce and loyal and full of fire, like a flame. I would burn down the gates of heaven rather than break my word to her. After a few weeks together, she took to taking photographs of us together and pinning them everywhere in the flat. Now, so many years on, it looks like a stalker's bedroom from a murder mystery. There is not one space on the walls empty of my face and hers. Tired, haggard, laughing, full of love and joy or pain and anger. Even when we fight, she photographs us and keeps it. She says she wants to document us, to force herself to remember me even if I leave and set her free. She says she will use it to find me again. I am undeserving of such unswerving loyalty. I love her with the force of 1,000 suns. All the loves and losses of my long life laid out and preserved in her. But she is getting older. I know it. I see it in her face and her eyes, hear it in her voice growing husky. She was only 22 when we met. It has been 20 years since then. For the first time in 2 millennia, I have had to start counting years again. It is exhilarating and terrifying. She will wither and fade one day, and I will sit by her grave for an eternity. I no longer believe in gods, but I believe in her, and her grave shall be the altar of my worship. I thought I was mad for a time, but her endless patience, her gentle reminders to her friends, to her family that no, I'm not a new lover, they have known me for a long time. They remind me it is churlish to think so. But I may still go mad when she finally slips into endless sleep. I remind myself that that will not be for at least another 40 years. It cannot be. And 40 years is a long time when you are paying enough attention to count them. And who knows? I am starting to show signs of growing older myself. The slightest crow feet at the edges of my smile. The first time she looked at me and declared, "You need a haircut." It is slow, but I notice my hair growing again. It never really changes when you're frozen in time. It is not much, but it is a start. Maybe by the time she is ready to die, I will be allowed to follow her. But I doubt it. She is beautiful and wonderful, effervescent and fragile as a butterfly. She will be taken, and I will live on. But now perhaps there is an end in sight. I know it worries her too, that she will die and I will be alone. Her eyes are older than her years. She is wise, and gorgeously so. She does not speak of it, does not ask, "When I am dead, will you visit me?" She does not need to. But until that day, I will hold her hand as tightly as she holds mine, and I will give thanks for every day of her life and her health, her love. She is my angel, my salvation, my Molly. Good night. Sleep well. And I will see you on Monday for another bedtime story.